It's an At the Office edition of the East Bank Sports Show, serving up the hottest sports takes from right here in Cleveland, Ohio. It's your hosts, Noah, John, and Erik.
But this is the Office edition of the East Bank Sports Show, so we're going to talk and debate some, little off the wall, a little less Cleveland-based topics. And let's start with an opinion that I might get some hate for. Should all playoff series only be one game? John, Erik, this is something I brought up last week when we were talking about whether or not we should, what topics we should be doing and all of that. And I am kind of the belief system that playoff sports would be better if it was all just one game. John, I know you hate that take because we started getting into it in our group text, but John, I'm going to let you start, then we'll go Erik, then I'll start to explain myself a little bit more once you two go.
Yeah, I could probably talk for 60 minutes straight and filibuster. I promise I won't, but I cannot think of a worse take that I've discussed with you guys since we've known each other in sports. There's a few key reasons. One, the money and the revenue, right? Sports is entertainment. Entertainment turns a profit. These businesses are in business for money. 7 games nets you a whole heck of a lot more with TV and with ticket sales than one game would. So just from a business perspective, I think it makes sense to stretch them out almost as far as you can. The other piece of it, though, is that payoff at the end of the season. Football is a different animal because it's so tough on everybody's body. You can only play so many games a season, but you can't play 162 regular season baseball games in a 3 and 4 series format for the most part, and then turn around and say, okay, Cubs and Indians a few years back, you guys got one game. You got 4 starting pitchers. You got different rotations and relievers. You got different lineups. There's different elements. Like baseball is not a sport where you say, okay, you get 9 innings to show everything you're worth. And I think it also minimizes the regular season. You have to reward teams, especially in the NBA. You have all this play-in tournament stuff at the beginning with the lower seeds. Like the NBA regular season already almost doesn't matter. It's a bunch of teams posturing, positioning, sort of kind of throwing out there just to say, okay, give me a seat at the table. We'll see what we can do in the playoffs. You want to take the regular season that's almost meaningless and make it completely meaningless. Tell everybody they got one game, and it doesn't matter what seed you are. You have one opportunity to beat your opponent. I just don't think it makes sense. The cream rises to the top. The reason they have 7-game series is 95% of the time or more, the better team wins over 7-game stretch. I mean, we see it in the NCAA tournament all the time. The best team doesn't always win because one hot half of three-point shooting or one bad half of three-point shooting, and a team that was supposed to be world beaters is out of it. I mean, ask Virginia as a number 1 seed losing in the first round for the first time ever, if they would like a game 2 and game 3 to run it back and show everybody that they should be there. I can't think of a single reason why you would want to move baseball and NBA or hockey to a 1-game format. The drama of the playoffs is so amazing because you have these elongated series where there's matchups and teams that learn each other. I just can't even think of a good argument as to why we'd want to go to 1 game in any format. I mean, hell, I think the World Series when they started was a 9-game series and they cut it back to 7. A 1-game series, especially for baseball, just doesn't make sense to me.
Erik, because I'm feeling it today now already off of that one.
Noah's on one.
Should playoffs be 1 game in all sports? Absolutely not. Everything that John just said, I'll rehash a little bit because I think he made every point that I had. First of all, just talking numbers, like he said, baseball season's 162 games. Most of the regular season are 3-game series. In the NBA, it's 82 games. And while I do think that the seasons are too long and that both leagues are trying their best to change the game to entice more viewers, that's another story. So you're going to take 162 or 82 game season and distill it down to a one and done single game. That's not just ridiculous, it's criminal. let's focus on baseball just a little more. Baseball's about proving your worth over a series of games. That's the structure of what baseball is in its essence. What's the point, like John was saying, of building a pitching rotation if we're just going to do a 1-game series? Sure, you're probably going to add a little bit to the randomness to the field of possible World Series champions, but that's about it. Switching to the NBA, I think, again, as John said, we're already seeing that impact and downside to the massive playoff field and play-in tournament. As much as I like playoff basketball, and I was watching both games last night, it makes the regular season terrible. Nobody plays very hard as it is. I'd rather see a bit more pressure be put on teams to win their division and make a playoff push, if I'm being honest. Last night's a good example where the Warriors and the Kings played. It's a single game elimination. The Warriors were eliminated. Yes, they looked terrible. I think Klay Thompson went like 0 for 10. He was absolutely awful. He couldn't hit. I mean, I'm talking wide open corner threes he could not knock down. If you make that a 3-game series, though, maybe those things change. I'm not advocating that play-in tournament should be 3 games. Not at all. I'm just saying that it changes how that game works. I can see the appeal to the single elimination game. I get where Noah's going to come from here, but I do really enjoy watching the coaches adapt and strategize to a longer series. That, you go down 1 game, for example, and you need to change your game plan, especially in basketball. That's a really big mix of what the sport is. And when you take that away, you're just going to neuter these games, in my opinion, and it's going to be less exciting to watch. I do find it interesting, though, that John led with the money. I understand that it's entertainment and that at the end of the day, we're talking about businesses who want to make a profit. But I do think that somewhat the 7-game series at times gets backlash from fans because it feels a little bit like a money grab. It really that happens when you have a team that's just far superior in sweeps, and you just get the feeling like, what are we doing here? We could have done this in 1 game, but that said, I'm playing devil's advocate there because going to a 1-game system is a terrible idea.
So now that you guys both lashed out on me for the 2nd week in a row, I'm going to actually come in this a little bit more level-headed than the Mike Tomlin argument last week. I do want to say I agree full-heartedly based off of solely the pitching argument about, baseball needing to be a series. I think I've always had this thought process in a heart of the NBA, right? To Eric's point, those, you see a 1v8 seed matchup, 9 times out of 10 end in a sweep or a gentleman's sweep. And it feels frustrating because you devote, when it's all said and done, if the basketball game's short, 2 hours, 2 hours, 2 hours, 2 hours, 8 hours total on a series of non-entertaining basketball, especially if you're not, watching a team that you care for and you're just watching basketball to watch basketball. The reason I like the 1-game series comes down to one thing. The NFL is the pinnacle of sports in America right now. It is the number 1 league without a doubt. They follow a 1-game playoff, structure. And I understand coming from a football player, you can't do a series of football games. You'd die, you'd be hurt, be rough. But I also think that attributes to the parity of the NFL. And the parity of the NFL is arguably, to me, one of the best parts about the NFL and American football. You see a team like Kansas City, and I know they're a dynasty, right? But I think us 3 can agree, at least in the regular season, they were not the best team in the NFL last year. They won the Super Bowl. And being able to see things like that and matchups and teams get hot and the streakiness matter and that kind of thing is what's important to me in sports, because at the end of the day, it's a team achievement. And when your team gels the most and if they come up out on top, that's what's important to me. Something else I want to touch on is, Eric, I think me and you were talking about this, but didn't the women's national championship, was it the women's or the men's national championship, have more viewers than like all of the World Series games last year?
Women's did, yeah.
Right.
All 7, if I'm not mistaken. Or I don't think it went to 7, but you get my point.
So you want to use that money argument, but at the same time, the parity of a March Madness, right? One seed getting beat by a 16 seed in a shot in the dark is, one of those moments I don't think any of us forget. We bring it up. I mean, you brought it up today. I think those kind of moments are a big part what give sports appeal. And when you run a 7-game series, sometimes it's, just at the end of the day, the talent's going to win because they have so many chances at beating what is a rock, paper, scissors match almost.
Yeah, I guess there's a few critical flaws that I see in the argument. The first one is that the purpose of the playoffs in any sport isn't to create drama, it's to crown a champion. And the best way to crown a champion is for the team that's better to rise to the top. Now, the NFL is a different beast. I think to compare the NFL to MLB or NBA, I hear what you're saying on the 1-game piece, but they're just vastly different sports. I mean, you're talking about a team that plays 17 games in a regular season. They had to push to that over the years. It's a 1-game, one and done. It all has to happen on Sunday type of league. That isn't so for any of the other major sports. I mean, hell, even in golf, you get 4 rounds over 4 days to prove yourself. So I don't think the purpose of the playoffs is the entertainment. I think it's to crown a champ, and you can't crown a champ with a one and done in a sport like baseball.
I want to jump in and just take Noah's side a little bit here. And it makes my skin crawl a little bit to even say that at this point.
Whatever, man.
But I think looking at soccer and the Champions League would be a good model to argue against what you just said. They are more like American football in that, especially in the later rounds, their tournaments are a one and done. The World Cup's a good example, a one and done, even though it's a massive tournament with a lot of teams, different than American football, certainly, but that works well. And those matchups are built up really, really well. I know I'm the resident soccer fan here, but you see exactly what Noah was saying in that sport.
But I don't feel like the Premier League teams play series during the season. Like soccer's another game like American football. It's not as taxing physically in terms of contact, but they don't play 6 games a week in the Premier League.
I want to interject for a second here. I want to table the baseball side of this because I honestly agree with you. You think about pitching rotations, different lineups every night. It makes sense to do a series for baseball. So I'm going to pull back my thought for both leagues, and I'm going to push it to just NBA for debate's sake and say, much like Premier League, why can't they play 1 game? Seeing LeBron take a Lakers team that struggled all year and go 1-1-1-1 champion and get a ring, I think is just as entertaining to see Boston and who's even number 1. Is it Denver or did the Timberwolves finish number 1 in the West?
T-Wolves, I think.
I just see Boston and the T-Wolves in the final. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't love it. I still don't like anything about it. I hear what you're saying about the Premier League. I'm not saying that – my argument isn't that a 1-game scenario in the NBA wouldn't be entertaining. It would be. It would just deprive you of everything else that sports is supposed to be in a playoff setting. You open yourself up to random chance. There's no point in the regular season. Everybody just needs to get healthy and make sure they can win 3 games over the course of a week to win an NBA championship? I mean, that is wild to me. And I also don't think that it crowns the champion. I also don't think that with a 7-game series that there's no parity. It is a widely held fallacy and misconception that there is more parity in the NFL than there is in other leagues. Everybody thinks there is because you see, the Texans sucked and then they got good. But if you look at the list of the last 20 years in the teams to make and win the Super Bowl, it's the Chiefs and Patriots and like 3 other teams. The 49ers are always there. The Ravens and Steelers are always there. The Patriots are always there. If there were true parity in the NFL, we wouldn't be sitting here waiting for our first Super Bowl berth. The Guardians/Indians have made the World Series a handful of times in my life, and the Browns haven't sniffed one. So this argument that the NFL has more parity, yeah, there's more parity in the teams that are mediocre. But there was no parity when Tom Brady was ripping off Super Bowls every 15 minutes. There was no parity when the Cowboys had Troy Aikman or the Niners had Joe Montana and Jerry Rice. We think of parity because we think any given Sunday, and yeah, any given Sunday something can happen. But when push comes to shove and you look at the Super Bowls, it is very top heavy in terms of the haves and the have-nots.
But I would argue that for a second too. And I'm sorry, Eric, I know you wanted to go there, but you see teams, and I'm just going to use Kansas City last year as another example. Kansas City wasn't the best team last year. They made it based off of the parity and the parity's sake of they gelled at the right time and went all the way and won the Super Bowl, in my opinion. And, we can get into that nitty gritty of Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes. Andy Reid is a different, type of coach, different level of coach. But I think there's parity to be said, even when it is, the Patriots make it, and win 6, or the Chiefs win 3. And I think there's parity involved there as well, because you've never seen an undefeated team in the NFL also win a Super Bowl that season.
Yeah, I think it's just super fast, Eric. I want to not want to cut you off. We keep using the term parity, but parity basically means like utilitarian democratization of who shows up in this game. To call Kansas City not the best team in the league and to say that represents parity is wild, when Kansas City played in 4 of the last 5 Super Bowls.
But were they the best? Can you look me in the eye right now and tell me they were the best team in the NFL last year from front to back?
No, they were when it mattered.
Did they need to be? Yeah,
right.
Right, but that's
they turned it on when they needed to turn it on, just like we're going to see in basketball. I get what you're both saying. One of the games, I was a little bummed to go live at 9 tonight because one of the games I was most excited for was Heat 76ers. And it's live right now. Last I looked, 76ers had a slight lead. And that's one of the examples where, do you not want to see a 3-game series with those two teams? Because I think on the whole, the Heat are probably a little better, but the 76ers could edge them tonight because it's a one and done situation. And to your guys' point, I think John's right. I don't think there is more parity in the NFL. I think it's exactly what he said. We think of any given Sunday because anything can happen on a Sunday, but that doesn't equal parity. We've only had a handful of Super Bowl winners. Everything that he just said is exactly what I was rebutting in my mind before he said it.
Yeah.
You're right. Kansas City did not look like the best team during the regular season. Their Super Bowl win, though, I want to be clear, I don't think it was them gelling at the right time. It was professionals knowing what needed to be done when they got to that time of the year and going out there and executing their jobs with, like you said, one of the best quarterbacks and one of the best coaches, not just in the game today, but in the history of the game. That's not parity. That's almost what's expected. We expect those of the good teams. What are falling short of expectations are the teams like the Bills, where you expect more out of them when they have a crazy season, or the Patriots. We look at it as parity because they went 18-0 and lost the Super Bowl. But that's not parity, in my opinion. So I don't think moving the other sports, and let's focus on basketball because you admitted that baseball should be a series. I don't think moving basketball to a one and done situation helps the sport. Yes, the NCAA tournament is incredible, but you have a lot more teams that are going into that, which helps with that. If you have the NBA and you only have a handful of teams that are playing 82 games and then trying to play a long tournament and single elimination, or not long at that point, it's not, like John said, your goal is to have the winner rise to the top. And in a longer series, that's who you're showing who the best teams are, because the best teams really do pretty much in all sports. If you gave the Chiefs a 7-game series, they're probably going to win and push for the majority, not taking injuries and things like that into account. I think your goal is to crown the best team, and that's what these series do.
And I think one more quick stat I'm going to throw at you, Noah. I am 38 years old, and since I was in high school, I have to check my math on this, there have been 3 Super Bowls that did not have the New England Patriots, Kansas City Chiefs, or Pittsburgh Steelers in it.
Let me ask you
through in my head.
Parity. I mean, I know there was one. There's a couple. We had the Rams and the Bengals just a few years ago.
Baltimore. Who did they beat?
Baltimore played San Francisco. And then I think we had the Saints and Colts when I was in college or right after college.
Let me ask you both this. This is something I was kind of thinking as we're talking about it. Let's table the injuries and all the brutality that's involved with football to the side. Would you rather it be a multiple game series if you could have that in the NFL then?
No. It's a different sport, and maybe it is a little bit of this is what we've grown up used to.
That's what I think is the difference here. That's why I asked this.
I have 32 years that I've been watching sports in the same basic format in that entire time, but we're talking such different sports. You don't have a lineup in the NFL like you do in baseball where pitching and rotation and rest matters like it does in baseball. Or those games between, we're going to set a different lineup in game 2 because it's a left-hander and we're going to hit them different or try to pitch them differently. When it goes into that sort of thing, it just doesn't compare well to the NFL. I think your NBA argument's a little closer to the mark, but no, I wouldn't want to see the NFL go to a series.
John, what about you? Because you shook your head too, and I thought for sure you'd be like, yeah, if there's, no brutality and you're able to just do like games back to back, over a span of like 5 days or what. Why do you say no to the NFL?
It's just weird. Like, I think, if NFL had no brutality and they made it flag football, then yeah, you could play 3 or 4 times a week. You could do 3 games.
But throw away saying flag football. Just think, if football was physically able to be played in a 7-game series in a doable amount of time, would you have that?
No, not unless you change the regular season. It's about the regular season, the structure, and how you get there, added into how we're going to crown a champion. Like in NFL, it makes no sense. You can't play 17 games and then play a 7-game series for the Super Bowl. Baseball, you got 162. It's very different. For the reasons and I don't want to beat a dead horse for the reasons we already discussed, but no, I don't want to see a 7-game series or even a 3-game series in the NFL.
But do you guys think that if we did move baseball, and as much as I don't like it, baseball and basketball to a 1-game playoff series and championship, do you think that the World Series and the NBA Finals would become an event like the Super Bowl with the advertisers?
That's my biggest argument, I think, to it too, just because, we're all kind of in that advertiser, marketing space in some sense, is it would make it an event. Like NBA Finals Saturday. John, you joked World Series. You couldn't even call it the World Game or whatever. Ugh. World Game, Friday or whatever, or Sunday. Everything can be on a Sunday. I just think, I don't know. I love the spectacle that the NFL has, and we can throw away the parity argument and all that for a second too. The spectacle of the Super Bowl, where football fans and non-football fans all sit in front of their TV, eat a bunch of food that they shouldn't be eating, drink a lot of drinks that they probably shouldn't be drinking before they go to work or school the next day, and watch football and the commercials and the halftime show. You could amplify that and, arguably, like, take the MLB, for example, a league that's been trying to find its footing in a modern era where people call baseball boring, even though I disagree. giving the world, I'm just going to keep calling it the World Series, even though it's not a series, giving the World Series a spectacle like that, where we have some sort like the 7th inning stretch performers, it would be, I think it would help the sport, because to what I said with Erik earlier too, I mean, one game, the women's national championship versus a whole World Series did the same amount of viewers. Imagine a World Series where it's one game.
But do you see
everybody tunes in?
I don't know that you're right. A lot of non-football fans watch the Super Bowl. They watch it for the commercials and they watch it for the entertainment. This year they were watching for Taylor Swift. I'm not sure that the other two sports, baseball and basketball, would have that same appeal, even if you move it to a one game, one and done World Cup. We're taking it all series, non-series. I don't see that movement like the NFL. The NFL is a different beast. It is a marketing machine in a way that no other sports league has really had in the history of sports. Maybe when you talk World Cup, just because it's such a global phenomenon, but the NFL is its own animal. And again, trying to draw comparisons to it, I don't think we'd see that same event. It would be interesting. I'd like to see it from a marketing standpoint. I think it'd be a lot of fun. I just don't think it would have the same gravitas.
Yeah. And I think we're getting to the point now too where we're trying to shove too many things into one. We think of baseball and basketball and football and hockey and golf and tennis and Premier League. Well, they're all sports, so they should do things all the same way. But they have unique followings with unique fan bases. Major League Baseball is still very popular. It used to be the national pastime. I know the NFL has surpassed it. I think a lot of that is fantasy football and the uniqueness of the one-game structure, which is another conversation maybe for another day. But I don't want to think that – I can tell you right now that Major League Baseball doesn't wake up in the morning and think, well, we should just be the NFL. They have a different product. They have a different fan base. It's a different experience. So just because they're competing for eyeballs at certain times of the year, I don't want to confuse it. I don't think the NBA wants to be the NFL. The other thing that I'll say is I don't want to be prisoner of the moment. I think that we're talking about this in the here and now because the NFL is king. But I'll give you another very closely related example of the NFL and what you get when you have all these teams jammed in. You have two teams in one game. They've changed college football in the playoffs so many freaking times in the last 15 years because I lived in a world where they would just vote on a national champion and everybody got sick of it. And then we watched the Rose Bowl over here and the Sugar Bowl over here and have to decide, well, if Alabama played Washington. So it sucked. And they created one game. And then we watched Ohio State beat Miami, who everybody said was going to win by 14 points. And then Ohio State got their doors blown off by Florida when I think they were favorites in the game. And then we said, hey, maybe the third team in the country deserves a shot. So, too much one and done and too much consolidation, I think, is bad for the sport. Spreading it out, giving more teams a chance. I hear what you're saying in terms of the parity for one game, but if we go too far in the other direction, it creates a mess because there was nothing worse than watching the Rose Bowl and thinking to yourself, okay, well, Penn State went undefeated. I wonder if the AP poll will name them a national champ. So I don't want to go too minimalistic with any of these games either because that was gross.
I'm glad you didn't mention that LSU also blew our doors off.
That did happen.
Right after that.
Guys, I'm going to wrap this segment up. Honestly, I thought that was a really good discussion and just kind of seeing everybody's thoughts and the age. But I'm going to have us cut to commercial real quick.